The cafe door closed behind them with a soft chime, and the cold air hit Victoria's face like a slap. She gripped the wheels of her chair harder than necessary, propelling herself forward with quick, angry motions. Daniel walked beside her, hands shoved deep in his coat pockets, saying nothing. The silence between them wasn't comfortable. It was charged, fragile, like glass stretched too thin. "You don't have to follow me," Victoria said without looking at him. "I'm not following you. I'm walking in the same direction I'm going. It's a public sidewalk." She stopped abruptly, and he had to sidestep to avoid colliding with her. When she looked up at him, her eyes were red-rimmed but dry now, her jaw set in a hard line. "What do you want, Daniel?" He met her gaze without flinching. "Coffee. With you. If you're willing to try this again." "Try what?" "The part where I humiliate myself in front of strangers, or the part where you feel obligated to stay because you're too polite to leave?" "Neither." He crouched down so they were eye level, right there on the sidewalk. People passed around them, some glancing curiously, but he didn't seem to notice. "I'm here because I want to be, not because my sister set this up, not because I feel sorry for you. I'm here because the first real thing I've felt in 3 years just happened in that cafe, and I'm not ready to let it go yet." Victoria's breath caught. She wanted to call him a liar, to tell him he was full of shit, that men like him didn't choose women like her unless there was something broken in them too. But the way he was looking at her, steady, unflinching, without a trace of pity, made the words die in her throat. "I don't need saving," she said quietly. "Good. I'm not in the business of saving people. I can barely keep my own life together." A bitter laugh escaped her. "Then why are you still here?" "Because you're interesting. And I haven't been interested in anything for a long time." She studied his face, searching for the crack in the facade, the moment when his good intentions would crumble into something uglier. She'd seen it before. The initial kindness that slowly morphed into condescension, the admiration that turned into suffocating overprotection. But all she saw in Daniel's eyes was exhaustion and something that looked like hope, fragile and tentative. "1 more hour," she said finally. "There's a park 2 blocks from here. We can talk there. But if I get even a whiff of pity from you, I'm gone." He stood up, brushing off his knees. "Deal." The park was nearly empty, just a few joggers and a woman walking a golden retriever. Daniel bought 2 coffees from a food truck near the entrance. Black for him, caramel macchiato for her, because she'd mentioned it in passing during their brief conversation in the cafe. The fact that he'd remembered such a small detail caught her off guard. They found a bench overlooking a small pond where ducks paddled in lazy circles. Victoria positioned her chair at an angle so she could see both Daniel and the water. He sat on the bench, stretching his legs out in front of him, and took a long sip of his coffee. "So," she said, "tell me something real." He glanced at her. "Real how?" "Something you don't usually tell people on first dates. Something that matters." He was quiet for a moment, watching the ducks. "I hate being a single parent sometimes. Not because I don't love my kid. I do, more than anything. But because there are days when I wake up and I'm so tired I can't think straight, and all I want is for someone else to make the decisions for once. To tell me what to do, how to do it, whether I'm screwing everything up." He paused. "People act like admitting that makes me a bad father, like I'm supposed to be grateful every second, like loving my kid means I can't also be exhausted and angry and scared I'm doing everything wrong." Victoria took a slow sip of her coffee, letting his words settle. "That's real," she said softly. "Your turn." She looked out at the pond. "I miss who I used to be. Before the accident, I was ruthless, ambitious, kind of a bitch, if I'm being honest. I didn't need anyone, didn't want anyone, and now I'm supposed to be inspirational, brave. People see the wheelchair, and they expect me to be some kind of hero for just existing. They don't see that I'm still ruthless, still ambitious, still kind of a bitch. They just see the chair." "I see you," Daniel said. She turned to look at him. "You don't know me." "Not yet, but I want to." "Why?" He shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe because you're the first person in 3 years who didn't ask me how I was doing in that tone. You know the one. Where it's not really a question, just an excuse to tell me how strong I am, how well I'm handling things. You didn't do that. You just cried, and somehow that felt more honest than anything anyone said to me in a long time." Victoria laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Great. So we're both disasters. Pretty much. They sat in silence for a while, watching the ducks. It was the kind of silence that didn't need filling, the kind that felt like breathing room after too much talking. Victoria found herself relaxing, just slightly, the tension in her shoulders easing. "Can I ask you something?" Daniel said eventually. "You can ask. I might not answer." "What happened?" "The accident." She'd known the question was coming, but it still made her chest tighten. Most people danced around it, tried to be delicate, but Daniel's directness was almost a relief. "Car accident. Drunk driver ran a red light, T-boned me on the driver's side, crushed my lower spine." She said it matter-of-factly, the way she'd said it 100 times before. "I was on my way to close a deal that would have doubled my company's value. Instead, I woke up in a hospital 3 days later and they told me I'd never walk again." "How long ago?" 2 years. 1 month. 14 days. She gave him a wry smile. "But who's counting?" "And your company?" "Still mine. Still running. Turns out you don't need working legs to be a CEO, just a sharp mind and a willingness to fire anyone who underestimates you." "Did you have to fire a lot of people?" "More than I should have. Investors, board members, even my CFO. They all started treating me like I was made of glass. Wanted to put me on leave, bring in interim leadership, all this bullshit about protecting the company's interests. So I cleaned house. Made it very clear that the only thing that changed about me was my mode of transportation." Daniel nodded slowly. "That must have been lonely." The observation hit harder than she expected. "Yeah," she said quietly. "It was. What about friends? Family?" Her laugh was hollow. "My parents died when I was in college. Car accident, actually. Kind of ironic. As for friends, turns out most of them weren't really friends. They were networking contacts, social climbers, people who liked the idea of knowing a successful woman. Once I wasn't useful to them anymore, or once they couldn't figure out how to act around me, they disappeared. Except for my assistant, Rachel. She's the only one who stuck around. Probably because I pay her too well to leave." "That's not fair to her." Victoria blinked. "What?" "Maybe she stayed because she actually cares about you, not just the paycheck." "You don't know Rachel." "You're right, but I know people, and I know loyalty. The kind that stays doesn't usually come with a price tag." She wanted to argue, but something in his voice made her pause. "What about you?" she asked instead. "You mentioned your sister set this up. What about everyone else?" Daniel's expression darkened slightly. "My parents are still around. They help with my kid when they can, but they've never really forgiven me for marrying someone they didn't approve of. My wife, Emma, she wasn't from their world. She was an artist, lived in a studio apartment, barely made rent most months. My parents thought she was using me, that she'd trap me with a pregnancy." He took a breath. "Turns out Emma got pregnant, but not because she was trying to trap anyone. She just wanted a family. And so did I." "What happened to her?" Victoria asked gently. "Cancer. Ovarian. She was diagnosed when our kid was 6 months old, gone within a year." His voice was flat, stripped of emotion, like he'd told the story so many times it had lost its edges. "My parents showed up to the funeral, said all the right things, then went back to their lives. They loved their grandkid, but they loved the idea of their grandkid more. The perfect little heir to the family name, as long as I raise them the right way, send them to the right schools, marry the right person next time." "Are you going to? Marry the right person?" He looked at her. "I don't even know what that means anymore. I thought I did. I thought Emma was the right person, and she was. But she's gone. And I'm still here. And everything I thought I knew about my life doesn't make sense anymore." Victoria understood that feeling more than she wanted to admit. "How old's your kid?" 4, just turned 4 last month." "Do they remember her? Their mom? Bits and pieces, a song she used to sing, the way she smelled, but mostly, no. And I don't know if that's better or worse." They fell silent again, the weight of their shared grief settling between them like a third presence. Victoria had spent 2 years building walls around herself, convincing herself that she didn't need anyone, that vulnerability was weakness. But sitting here with Daniel, a man she'd known for less than 2 hours, she felt those walls cracking. "This is a terrible first date," she said finally. Daniel laughed, a real laugh that reached his eyes. "The worst." "Want to try for a second one?" He looked at her surprised. Yeah, I do. Over the next 3 weeks, they fell into a rhythm. Daniel would text her in the mornings. Nothing profound, just small observations about his day. Victoria would respond with sarcasm and the occasional genuine thought. They met twice a week, always somewhere public, always somewhere she could navigate easily. A museum, a bookstore with wide aisles, a restaurant with ramp access and tables that didn't feel like pity. She learned that Daniel worked as a freelance architect, designing sustainable buildings for nonprofits and small businesses. He was good at it, meticulous and creative, but he'd given up on the bigger projects after Emma died. Too much time away from home, too much risk. Victoria found herself challenging him on that, pushing him to think bigger again, and to her surprise, he didn't shut her down. He listened. He learned that Victoria's company, Sterling Innovations, specialized in adaptive technology, software and devices designed to make life easier for people with disabilities. It was work she'd fallen into after her accident, turning her own frustration into something productive. She was brilliant at it, ruthless in negotiations, and terrified of failing. Why terrified, Washawul? Daniel asked one evening as they sat in her office after hours. He'd brought takeout, Thai food, extra spicy the way she liked it, and they were eating straight from the containers surrounded by blueprints and prototypes. Because if I fail, it proves them right, she said simply. Who? Everyone who thought I couldn't do this anymore. Everyone who looked at me after the accident and saw someone broken. If I fail, it means they were right to doubt me. Daniel set down his fork. That's a lot of pressure. I know. And it's bullshit. She looked up sharply. Excuse me? You're allowed to fail, Victoria. Failing doesn't mean you're broken. It just means you're human. Easy for you to say. Is it? His voice was calm but firm. I fail every day. I burn dinner, I lose my temper with my kid, I miss deadlines, I forget important things. And yeah, sometimes I feel like a failure, but I'm not. I'm just doing my best, and my best isn't always enough, and that's okay. It's not the same. Why not? Because you didn't have to prove you deserved to keep your job. You didn't have to fight to convince people you were still capable. You didn't have to rebuild your entire life from scratch, while everyone watched and waited for you to collapse. He was quiet for a moment. You're right, I didn't. But that doesn't mean your fear isn't bullshit. You've already proven yourself, Victoria. The only person who doesn't believe that is you. She wanted to argue, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she looked down at her food, blinking away the sudden sting of tears. Hey, Daniel said softly. He reached across the desk and gently touched her hand. I didn't mean to upset you. You didn't. She turned her hand over, lacing her fingers through his. You're the first person who's called me out on my shit without making it about the wheelchair. Because it's not about the wheelchair. It's about you being scared, and that's okay. But don't let fear make you smaller than you are. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and something shifted. The walls she'd built so carefully started to crumble, not all at once, but enough to let him in. Their first real fight happened on a Saturday afternoon. Daniel had invited her to a picnic with his kid, and Victoria had said yes before she could talk herself out of it. She'd met children before. Her company had a whole division dedicated to adaptive toys and educational tools, but meeting Daniel's child felt different. It felt significant. His name was Sam, short for Samuel, and he was exactly as Daniel had described, curious, talkative, and completely unfiltered. He took one look at Victoria's wheelchair and said, Cool, can I ride on it? Victoria laughed despite herself. Maybe later. They spent the afternoon in a park near Daniel's house, eating sandwiches and watching Sam chase a soccer ball. Victoria stayed on the sidelines, feeling awkward and out of place, but Sam kept running back to her, demanding she watch his tricks, asking her questions about everything from her chair to her job to why her hair was so shiny. Do you use special shampoo? He asked seriously. Sam, Daniel warned. What? I'm just asking. Victoria grinned. It's okay. And yes, I do. It's called expensive. Sam giggled, and Victoria felt something warm spread through her chest. But the warmth curdled when another family arrived at the park, a couple with 2 kids around Sam's age. The mother glanced at Victoria, then at Daniel, and her expression shifted into something Victoria had seen too many times before. Pity mixed with curiosity, like she was watching a documentary instead of a real person. The mother walked over, all bright smiles and false cheer. "Hi, I'm Jenna. Are you all having a play date?" Daniel stood up, brushing grass off his jeans. "Something like that." Jenna's gaze flicked to Victoria, then back to Daniel. "That's so wonderful. It's really great that you're, including everyone." Victoria's stomach dropped. Including everyone. Like she was a charity case. "She's not a project," Daniel said, his voice tight. Jenna blinked, clearly not expecting the pushback. "Oh, I didn't mean, I just think it's really admirable what you're doing. Not everyone would what?" Victoria cut in, her tone icy. "Not everyone would date someone in a wheelchair? Not everyone would bring them around their kid?" "Finish the sentence, Jenna." Jenna's face flushed. "I didn't mean it like that." "Yes, you did." Victoria turned to Daniel. "I'm leaving." Victoria says, "I said I'm leaving." She started wheeling toward the parking lot, her hands shaking with anger. Daniel caught up with her at her car, Sam trailing behind him. "Wait, just wait." "For what? So you can tell me she didn't mean it? So you can make excuses for her?" "No, I was going to tell you she's an idiot and I'm sorry." That stopped her. She looked up at him, her chest heaving. "You didn't say anything." "I did." "Not enough. You should have told her to go to hell." "You're right. I should have." He crouched down beside her chair. "I'm sorry. I'm still figuring this out, and I screwed up." "Figuring what out?" "How to be with you. How to stand up for you without making you feel like you need me to. How to love you without making it about saving you." The word love hung in the air between them, and Victoria's breath caught. "You don't love me. We've known each other 3 weeks." "I know, but I'm starting to, and that scares the hell out of me." She stared at him, her anger warring with something softer, more dangerous. "You can't love me, Daniel. Us, it's too complicated. I'm too complicated." "I don't care." You should." "But I don't." He reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. "I'm not asking you to be less complicated. I'm asking you to let me in anyway." Sam tugged on Daniel's sleeve. "Dad, why is Victoria crying?" "I'm not crying," Victoria said quickly, swiping at her eyes. "You are," Sam said matter-of-factly. "But that's okay. Dad cries sometimes too." Daniel shot her a helpless look, and despite everything, Victoria laughed. "Your kid is way too perceptive. Tell me about it." She took a shaky breath. "I need time to think about this. About us." "Okay. And I need you to promise me something." "What?" "If someone says something like that again, if anyone makes me feel like I'm some kind of burden or charity case, you don't hesitate. You shut it down, immediately." "I promise." She nodded, still not entirely convinced, but willing to try. "Okay." That night, alone in her apartment, Victoria stared at her phone. Daniel had texted her an hour ago. Just a simple good night, nothing more. She hadn't responded yet. She kept typing and deleting, trying to find the right words. Finally, she settled on the truth. "I'm scared." His response came almost immediately. "Me too. But I'm not going anywhere." She stared at the screen, her chest tight, and for the first time in 2 years, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, someone would actually stay. The following week brought rain that turned Boulder's streets into rivers of muddy runoff. Victoria sat in her office on the 14th floor of Sterling Innovations, watching water streak down the floor-to-ceiling windows. Her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Sam wants to know if you like dinosaurs." She smiled despite the tension coiled in her shoulders from back-to-back board meetings. "Tell him I'm more of a velociraptor person, smart and vicious. He says that's his favorite too. You're officially cool now." Finally. Recognition. She set the phone down and returned to the spreadsheet glowing on her monitor, but her mind kept drifting. 3 days had passed since the park incident, and while she and Daniel had texted constantly, she hadn't seen him in person. Part of her wondered if he was giving her space or if he was having second thoughts. The other part, the part that terrified her, wondered if she was sabotaging something good because it was easier to be alone than to risk being left again. Her office door opened without a knock, which meant it was Rachel. Her assistant swept in carrying 2 coffees and a manila folder thick with documents. "The Brennan contract needs your signature. The prototype team wants a meeting about the new wheelchair interface, and your mother-in-law called again," Rachel said, setting 1 coffee in front of Victoria. Victoria's hand froze halfway to the cup. I don't have a mother-in-law. Sorry, ex-mother-in-law, technically. What did Patricia want? Rachel's expression turned carefully neutral. She didn't say. Just asked if you'd call her back. Victoria felt her jaw tighten. Patricia Westbrook, her ex-fiance's mother, had been silent for 18 months. The fact that she was reaching out now felt like a trap. Ignore it, Victoria said. If she calls again, tell her I'm unavailable. You got it. Rachel hesitated. Also, there's someone here to see you, no appointment. He said you'd want to talk to him. Who? Daniel Hayes. He's in the lobby with a kid who won't stop asking questions about the fish tank. Victoria's heart did something complicated in her chest. Send them up. 5 minutes later, Daniel walked into her office with Sam on his hip, both of them slightly damp from the rain. Sam was clutching a drawing that had been folded and unfolded so many times the paper was starting to tear along the creases. We're dripping on your carpet, Daniel said apologetically. I don't care. Victoria wheeled around her desk. What are you doing here? Sam made you something. He insisted we deliver it in person. Sam wiggled down from Daniel's arms and walked straight to Victoria, no hesitation, no fear. He thrust the drawing at her. I made you a picture. She unfolded it carefully. It was a crayon drawing of 3 stick figures, one tall, one small, one in what was clearly meant to be a wheelchair. They were standing in front of a house with a lopsided roof and a sun that took up half the sky. That's you, Sam said, pointing to the figure in the wheelchair. And that's me and Dad. We're at our house, but you're there too because Dad said you might come over for dinner sometime. Victoria looked up at Daniel, who was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. I didn't coach him, Daniel said quietly. That was all his idea. She looked back at the drawing, at the crooked smiles on all 3 figures, at the careful way Sam had drawn wheels on her chair. Something cracked open inside her chest. This is the best thing anyone's ever given me, she told Sam, and meant it. His face lit up. Really? Really? Can you come to dinner tonight? Dad's making spaghetti, but he always burns the garlic bread. I do not always burn it, Daniel protested. You did last week and the week before. Victoria laughed, and it felt good, felt real. I'd love to come to dinner. Sam cheered and ran to the window to look at the rain. Daniel stepped closer to Victoria's desk. You don't have to, he said quietly. I know this is fast. I know it's a lot. I want to. She met his eyes. I'm tired of being scared all the time. Me too. That evening, Victoria followed Daniel's directions to a neighborhood on the east side of Boulder, where the houses were smaller and closer together, where kids' bikes lay scattered in driveways and basketball hoops hung crooked over garage doors. His house was a modest 2-story with peeling blue paint and a yard that needed mowing. It was nothing like the sterile perfection of her downtown penthouse. She parked in the driveway and sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. Through the front window, she could see Daniel moving around the kitchen, Sam sitting at the table coloring. It looked warm, lived in, real. Before she could second-guess herself, she got out of the car and transferred to her chair. The ramp to the front door was newer than the rest of the house. Smooth wood, carefully constructed. Daniel must have built it recently. He answered the door before she could knock, flour dusting his shirt, a smile on his face that made her stomach flip. You made it. You built a ramp. He shrugged, suddenly looking self-conscious. I figured if you were going to come over, you should be able to get inside. When did you do this? Last weekend, after the park. She stared at him. He'd built her a ramp before she'd even agreed to come over, before they'd resolved their fight. He'd built it because he'd hoped she would. That's, her voice caught. That's really nice. It's practical. But his ears were red and she knew he was pleased. Inside, the house smelled like tomato sauce and burning garlic bread. Sam abandoned his coloring to give Victoria a tour, dragging her from room to room with infectious enthusiasm. The living room had toys scattered across the floor, the walls covered in crayon drawings and finger paintings. The kitchen was small but functional, dishes piled in the sink, a calendar on the fridge covered in scribbled appointments. It was chaotic and imperfect, and nothing like the carefully controlled spaces Victoria usually inhabited. She loved it. Dinner was exactly as promised. Spaghetti with meat sauce, slightly burnt garlic bread, and a Caesar salad that Sam refused to eat. They sat at a round table that wobbled when anyone leaned on it, and Victoria found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in months. "So, Victoria," Sam said through a mouthful of pasta, "do you have a house?" "Sam, don't talk with your mouth full," Daniel said automatically. Sam swallowed. "Do you have a house?" "I have an apartment in a tall building downtown." "Do you have toys?" "No toys." "Why not?" "I guess I never needed any." Sam looked horrified. "Everyone needs toys. What do you do for fun?" Victoria considered this seriously. "I work mostly, and sometimes I read." "That sounds boring." "Sam," Daniel warned. "What? It does." Victoria laughed. "You're not wrong." After dinner, Sam fell asleep on the couch halfway through an animated movie about talking cars. Daniel carried him upstairs, and Victoria waited in the living room, looking at the framed photos on the mantel. Most were of Sam at various ages, but there was one that caught her attention, a woman with dark curly hair and paint-stained hands, laughing at whoever was behind the camera. "Emma." "That was taken about a month before she got sick," Daniel said from behind her. Victoria turned her chair around. "She was beautiful." "She was." He sat down on the couch, running a hand through his hair. "Some days I can barely remember what her voice sounded like. That terrifies me more than anything." "Does Sam ask about her?" "Sometimes. Less than he used to." Daniel's expression was complicated. "I don't know if that's good or bad." Victoria wheeled closer. "Can I ask you something?" "Yeah." "Do you feel guilty about this? About us?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Sometimes. Not because I think Emma would want me to be alone. She'd probably haunt me if I turned into some tragic widower. But because being with you doesn't hurt the way I thought it would. I thought loving someone else would feel like betraying her, but it doesn't. It just feels like living again." "I get that," Victoria said softly. "Not the same situation, but I get it. I spent so long convincing myself I didn't need anyone that actually wanting someone feels like admitting defeat." "Is that what this is to you? Defeat?" "No." She reached for his hand. "It's scarier than that. It's hope." He pulled her closer, and she transferred from her chair to the couch beside him, her movements practiced and efficient. They sat like that for a while, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. The movie played on, forgotten. "I need to tell you something," Daniel said eventually. She tensed. "Okay." "My parents want to meet you." "Why does that sound like a problem?" "Because they are a problem. They're judgmental and old-fashioned, and they're going to say something that pisses you off. I guarantee it." Victoria pulled back to look at him. "So don't let me meet them. I want you to meet them. I want them to see that I'm serious about you, but I also want to prepare you for the fact that they're probably going to be terrible." "How terrible?" "My mother once told Emma she was too ethnic to fit into our family. Emma was Irish-Italian from New Jersey." "Jesus." "Yeah." Victoria thought about Patricia Westbrook, about all the society women who'd smiled to her face while sharpening knives behind her back. "I can handle your parents." "I know you can. I just don't want you to have to." "When do they want to meet?" "Sunday brunch, at their country club." "Of course it's at a country club." She sighed. "Fine, but you're buying me the most expensive thing on the menu." "Deal." Sunday arrived with clear skies and Victoria's anxiety at an all-time high. She changed outfits 3 times before settling on a navy dress and pearl earrings. Professional enough to signal she wasn't intimidated, expensive enough to make it clear she didn't need anyone's money. Rachel had helped her practice getting in and out of Daniel's car, which sat higher than her own, and Victoria hated every second of feeling unprepared. The country club was exactly as she'd imagined: rolling green lawns, a valet stand, women in tennis whites carrying designer bags. Daniel pulled up to the entrance and a valet opened Victoria's door, his eyes flickering to her chair in the back seat with barely concealed surprise. "We've got it," Daniel said firmly, moving around to help Victoria transfer. Inside, the dining room was all white tablecloths and fresh flowers, the kind of place where the silverware alone probably cost more than most people's rent. Daniel's parents were already seated at a table by the window, his father reading the Wall Street Journal, his mother sipping mimosa with a pinched expression. They looked up as Daniel approached with Victoria, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Mother, Dad!" Daniel pulled out a chair for Victoria, angling it so she could transfer easily. "This is Victoria Sterling." His mother, Margaret Hayes, extended a limp hand without standing. "Charmed." Her eyes raked over Victoria with the efficiency of a price scanner. "Sterling, any relation to the Connecticut Sterlings?" "No relation," Victoria said evenly. "My parents were from Ohio." "Ah." Margaret's tone suggested Ohio was somewhere between purgatory and a landfill. Daniel's father, Robert, at least had the decency to shake her hand properly. "Pleasure to meet you. Daniel mentioned you run a company." "I do." "Sterling Innovations. We develop adaptive technology." "How philanthropic," Margaret said, and Victoria knew immediately it wasn't a compliment. The waiter appeared to take their orders, and Victoria made good on her promise to Daniel, ordering the lobster eggs Benedict and a glass of champagne. Margaret ordered a fruit plate and another mimosa. "So, Victoria," Margaret said once the waiter left, "how did you and Daniel meet?" "Blind date, his sister set us up." Jessica always did have unusual taste. Margaret dabbed at her mouth with a napkin. "And what do you think of our Daniel?" Victoria glanced at Daniel, who looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. "I think he's kind, honest, and a better father than most people give him credit for." "Well, being a single parent is certainly challenging, though, of course, if he'd made better choices initially." "Mom, Daniel cut in sharply. "I'm simply saying, dear, that some paths are harder than others. And now, with another complicated situation—" "Stop," Daniel said. But Margaret continued as if he hadn't spoken, turning to Victoria with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sure you understand this is difficult for us. Our son has already been through so much, and naturally we want what's best for him and our grandson." Victoria's fingers tightened on her water glass. "And you don't think I'm what's best for him?" "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." Victoria leaned forward slightly. "Let me save us all some time. I'm successful, financially independent, and I don't need your son's money or your family's name. What I need is for him to be happy, and what makes him happy is up to him, not you." Margaret's nostrils flared. "I'm simply concerned about the practical realities." "The practical realities of what? Of me being in a wheelchair?" Victoria's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "Say it plainly, Margaret. Don't hide behind concern." "Victoria," Daniel started. "No." She kept her eyes on his mother. "If we're going to do this, let's be honest. You think I'm going to be a burden. You think your son is making a mistake getting involved with someone who can't walk. You think I'll hold him back, that I'll need constant care, that I'm somehow less than whoever you imagined him ending up with. Am I close?" The table fell silent. Margaret's face had gone pale, then red. "How dare you?" she said quietly. "How dare I what? Tell the truth? You've been dancing around it since we sat down." Victoria grabbed her bag. "Daniel, I'm leaving." "Wait." He stood up. "I'm coming with you." "Daniel Hayes, you sit down this instant," Margaret hissed. "No." He threw his napkin on the table. "You don't get to treat her like that. You don't get to make assumptions about her or about us. Victoria is the best thing that's happened to me in 3 years. And if you can't see that, if you can't treat her with basic respect, then we're done here." Robert finally spoke up. "Son, your mother is just worried." "Worried about what? That I'm actually happy, that I'm building a life that doesn't look exactly like the one you planned for me?" Daniel's voice was rising, and other diners were starting to stare. "Emma wasn't good enough for you, and now Victoria isn't good enough for you. Here's the thing. I don't care anymore. I'm done trying to get your approval." He moved to Victoria's side, his hand finding hers. "Let's go." They left the dining room in a wave of whispers and stares. The valet brought the car around, and Daniel helped Victoria transfer in silence. Neither of them spoke until they were on the highway heading back toward the city. "I'm sorry," Daniel said finally. "For what?" "For putting you through that. For my mother. For all of it." Victoria stared out the window at the mountains rising in the distance. "You stood up for me. I should have done it sooner. The second she started with that philanthropic bullshit. But you did do it. That's what matters." She turned to look at him. "No one's ever done that before." "What do you mean?" "When I was engaged, before the accident, my fiancé used to let his family say whatever they wanted about me. That I was too ambitious, too cold, too focused on work. He'd laugh it off, tell me they didn't mean it. After the accident, when he left, his mother actually called me to say she understood why he couldn't go through with the wedding, that it was too much to ask of him. Daniel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. What did you say? I told her to go to hell and hung up, but it hurt. It still hurts, because part of me believed her. Part of me still thinks she was right. She wasn't. How do you know? Because I know you, and you're not too much. You're exactly enough. Victoria felt tears burning behind her eyes. She blinked them back hard. Your parents are going to make this difficult. Let them. I meant what I said back there. I'm done caring what they think. They drove in silence for a while, the city sprawling out ahead of them. When Daniel pulled up outside Victoria's building, neither of them moved to get out. Come upstairs, Victoria said. Are you sure? I'm sure. Her apartment was pristine in a way that suddenly embarrassed her. White furniture, glass tables, everything carefully arranged and untouched. It looked like a showroom, not a home. Daniel noticed immediately. Where do you actually sit? He asked. What? All this furniture looks like it's never been used. Where do you sit when you want to relax? She gestured vaguely at the couch. He sat down on it, testing. This is the most uncomfortable thing I've ever experienced. Despite everything, she laughed. It's designer. It's terrible. He patted the space next to him. Come here anyway. She transferred from her chair to the couch, and he was right. It was hideously uncomfortable. But when he put his arm around her and she leaned into his warmth, it didn't matter. I don't know how to do this, she admitted quietly. Do what? Be with someone. Let someone in. I've spent so long protecting myself that I don't remember how to be vulnerable. Then we'll figure it out together. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. I'm not going anywhere, Victoria. I know you don't believe that yet, but I'll keep saying it until you do. She tilted her face up to look at him, and he kissed her properly this time, slow and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, she was breathless. Stay tonight, she whispered. What about Sam? Call your sister. Ask her to watch him. He pulled out his phone, never taking his eyes off her. You're sure? I'm sure. Later, tangled in her sheets with the city lights glowing through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Victoria felt something she hadn't felt in years, safe. Daniel's arm was draped across her waist, his breathing slow and even. She should have been asleep, but her mind wouldn't quiet. Daniel? She whispered. Thank you. For what? For staying. He pulled her closer. Always. She closed her eyes and let herself believe it, just for tonight. Tomorrow she could go back to being guarded and careful, but right now, in this moment, she let herself hope. Morning came too fast. Victoria woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and Daniel's side of the bed already empty. She could hear him in the kitchen, the clatter of dishes, the smell of coffee. For a moment she let herself lie there, staring at the ceiling, wondering what came next. By the time she transferred to her chair and wheeled into the kitchen, Daniel had managed to burn toast and create what looked like a crime scene with the coffee grounds. I was trying to be romantic, he said sheepishly, gesturing at the mess. Breakfast in bed, and all that. You're a disaster. I'm aware. He handed her a mug of coffee that was surprisingly perfect. But I make good coffee. You do. She took a sip, watching him try to scrape the charred bits off the toast. What time do you need to pick up Sam? Noon. Jessica's taking him to some kids' science museum thing first. He glanced at the clock on the microwave. I've got a few hours. Good. She set down her coffee. Because we need to talk. His expression shifted, became guarded. That's never a good way to start a sentence. It's not bad, just necessary. She wheeled closer to the counter. Yesterday was a lot. Your parents, what you said to them, this? She gestured between them. I need to know you actually meant it. I meant every word. Even the part about not caring what they think anymore? Especially that part. He abandoned the toast and came to sit at the small breakfast bar across from her. Look, I've spent my entire adult life trying to live up to their expectations. I married someone they hated, and when she died, part of me wondered if they were secretly relieved. Like now I could start over, do it right this time, marry someone from their world. He ran a hand through his hair. But I don't want their world. I want this, whatever this is with you. This is complicated. I know. I mean, really complicated. I have bad days where I can't get out of bed, where everything hurts and I'm angry at the world. I have a company that takes up most of my time and energy. I have trust issues that would require a team of therapists to unpack. And I will never, ever be the kind of woman who fits into your parents' country club. Good. I hate that place anyway. She wanted to smile, but the weight of what she was trying to say pressed down on her chest. I'm serious, Daniel. If we do this, if we really do this, there's no going back. Your parents will make your life hell. Your friends will have opinions. People will stare at us everywhere we go. And some days I'm going to push you away because I'm scared, and you're going to have to decide if you can handle that. He stood up and walked around the counter, crouching down beside her chair so they were eye level. Let me tell you something about my friends. Most of them disappeared after Emma died. They didn't know what to say, so they said nothing. The ones who stuck around, they're the ones who matter, and they'll be fine. As for my parents, I've already made my choice. And as for you pushing me away, he took her hand. I'll push back. Every single time. You don't know what you're signing up for. Neither do you. I'm moody. I forget important things. I stay up too late working on projects, and then I'm useless the next day. I let Sam eat cereal for dinner sometimes because I'm too tired to cook. I'm still grieving a wife I lost 3 years ago, and I probably will be for the rest of my life. I'm a package deal with a 4-year-old who asks a million questions and doesn't understand personal space. So if we're listing reasons why this won't work, I've got plenty too. Victoria felt something crack open inside her, something that had been locked tight for 2 years. Why are you so calm about this? Because I'm tired of being afraid. Losing Emma taught me that nothing is guaranteed. I could spend the rest of my life playing it safe, protecting myself, keeping everyone at arm's length. Or I could take a chance on something that makes me feel alive again. He squeezed her hand. I choose alive. She leaned forward and kissed him, hard and desperate, trying to pour everything she couldn't say into that kiss. When they broke apart, she was crying. I'm terrified, she whispered. Me too, but we'll be terrified together. 3 weeks passed in a blur of stolen moments and cautious optimism. Daniel started spending more nights at Victoria's apartment, though he always left early to get Sam ready for preschool. They fell into a rhythm that felt both natural and fragile. Dinners at his house, late-night conversations after Sam went to bed, weekends at the park where Victoria gradually became a fixture in their lives. Sam had accepted her presence with the easy adaptability of children. He asked questions about her chair, about why she couldn't walk, about whether it hurt, and Victoria answered honestly. She never talked down to him, never tried to sugarcoat the reality of her situation, and he seemed to appreciate that. He started drawing her into all his pictures, sometimes remembering the wheelchair, sometimes forgetting it entirely. Work became both easier and harder. Easier because Victoria found herself actually looking forward to leaving the office, to having somewhere to be that wasn't another meeting or networking event. Harder because her focus was split in ways it had never been before. Rachel noticed immediately. You're different, Gia, her assistant said one afternoon, setting a stack of contracts on Victoria's desk. Different how? Lighter. Less like you're constantly bracing for impact. Rachel paused. It's nice. Looks good on you. Victoria glanced up from her computer. Is this your way of saying I was a nightmare before? I would never. Rachel's smile was knowing. But for the record, Daniel seems good for you. Sam, too. Don't jinx it. I'm not. I'm just saying it's okay to be happy. But happiness, Victoria was learning, came with its own set of complications. A week later, Daniel asked her to come to a dinner party thrown by one of his old college friends. She said yes before she could overthink it, but the anxiety started building days before the actual event. What if they're like your parents? She asked Daniel as they drove to the restaurant. They're not. How do you know? Because Marcus and his wife Diane are good people. They knew Emma. They loved Emma, and they're going to love you too. Victoria wasn't convinced, but she put on her best armor, a black dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent, heels she couldn't wear but brought anyway because they looked good resting on her footrests, makeup that took 40 minutes to apply. If people were going to stare, she'd give them something worth looking at. The restaurant was trendy and loud, all exposed brick and industrial lighting. Daniel had called ahead to make sure there was accessible seating, but even so, Victoria had to navigate around tables packed too close together, her chair bumping against chair legs and purses hanging from seat backs. By the time they reached their table, she was already exhausted. Marcus stood up as they approached, a tall man with warm brown skin and an easy smile. "Daniel, man, it's been too long." He pulled Daniel into a hug, then turned to Victoria. "And you must be Victoria. I'm Marcus. This is my wife, Diane." Diane waved from her seat, visibly pregnant and looking tired but happy. "Sorry, not getting up. If I stand, I'll have to pee, and I just got comfortable." Victoria liked her immediately. They ordered drinks, wine for everyone except Diane, who got sparkling water with lime, and fell into easy conversation. Marcus and Daniel traded stories about their college days, most of which seemed to involve terrible decisions and even worse, hangovers. Diane worked as a physical therapist, and she asked Victoria about her chair with genuine professional curiosity, not the careful tiptoeing Victoria was used to. "I work with a lot of adaptive equipment," Diane said. "That's a nice setup you've got, custom?" "Yeah, I had it built to spec about 6 months after the accident. The standard ones were too heavy, and the sports chairs weren't practical for everyday use." "Makes sense. What kind of mobility do you have? If you don't mind me asking." "I don't mind." And surprisingly, she didn't. There was something refreshing about Diane's directness. Complete paralysis from T10 down, some sensation, no motor function. "That's rough. How's your pain management?" They fell into a discussion about nerve pain and muscle spasms, about the difference between good doctors and ones who treated every complaint like drug-seeking behavior. Daniel and Marcus drifted into their own conversation about a building project Marcus was consulting on, and for a while everything felt normal. Then Marcus's brother showed up. Tyler was late and loud, bursting into the restaurant like he owned it, already a few drinks deep from wherever he'd been before. He clapped Marcus on the back, kissed Diane's cheek, and then his eyes landed on Victoria. "Well, well," he said, dropping into the empty chair across from her. "You must be the famous Victoria." "I must be," she said evenly. "Daniel's told us all about you. Corporate powerhouse, self-made success story, total badass." He leaned back in his chair, appraising her. "Didn't mention the chair, though." The table went silent. Daniel's hand found Victoria's under the table, squeezing tight. "Why would he?" Victoria asked, her voice dangerously calm. Tyler shrugged. "Just seems like relevant information, you know. I mean, it's not exactly something you can miss." "Tyler," Marcus said sharply. "Don't." "What?" "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking." "No," Daniel cut in, his voice tight. "You're saying what assholes think. There's a difference." Tyler held up his hands. "Hey, no offense meant. I just think it's brave, you know? Daniel getting back out there, taking on a challenge like that." Victoria felt the anger rise in her throat, hot and bitter. "A challenge?" "Yeah, I mean, it's admirable. Not every guy would—" She didn't let him finish. "Let me stop you right there. I'm not a challenge. I'm not a charity case. I'm not some inspirational story for you to feel good about. I'm a person who happens to use a wheelchair, and if you can't see past that, then you're not worth my time." She grabbed her bag and started wheeling toward the door, fury propelling her forward. Behind her, she could hear Daniel's chair scraping back, his voice raised. "You're an asshole, Tyler. Stay the hell away from us." He caught up with her outside, where the night air was sharp and cold. Victoria was shaking, though whether from anger or humiliation she couldn't tell. "I'm sorry," Daniel said. "I had no idea he'd—" "It doesn't matter." "It does matter. He was completely out of line." "He said what everyone was thinking, Daniel. You heard him. Taking on a challenge. Like I'm some kind of project you decided to fix." "That's not what I think. You know that's not what I think." "Do I?" She spun her chair to face him. "Because right now I'm wondering if he's right. If this whole thing is just you trying to prove something. To your parents, to yourself, to the world. Look at me, I'm such a good guy dating the woman in the wheelchair." "Stop it." His voice was hard now, frustrated. "Stop putting words in my mouth. Stop assuming the worst about me." "I'm not assuming. I'm being realistic." "No, you're being scared, and you're lashing out because that's easier than admitting you care about this. About us." She stared at him, her chest heaving. "Maybe I'm lashing out because I'm tired of having to defend my existence every time we leave the house. Maybe I'm tired of people treating me like I'm brave just for being alive. Maybe I'm tired of wondering when you're going to realize this is too hard and walk away. I'm not walking away. You say that now. I'll say it forever if that's what it takes for you to believe me. He crouched down beside her chair, his eyes fierce. Tyler is an idiot. My parents are judgmental. People are going to stare and make assumptions and say stupid things. I can't control that. But what I can control is this. I love you. I'm in love with you, and not despite the wheelchair, not because of it, but because you're brilliant and fierce and you make me want to be better. So you can push me away all you want, but I'm not going anywhere. The words hit her like a physical blow. You love me. Yes. We've known each other 2 months. I don't care. That's insane. Probably. He stood up, offering his hand. Come back inside. Let me introduce you to people who actually matter, people who'll see you the way I do. She looked at his hand, at his face, at the stubborn set of his jaw. Every instinct told her to run, to protect herself, to end this before it could hurt her worse. But there was something in his eyes, something steady and sure, that made her want to try. Okay, she said quietly. But if Tyler says one more word, I'm throwing my wine in his face. I'll help you aim. They went back inside together. Tyler was gone. Marcus had apparently told him to leave, and Diane looked mortified. I'm so sorry, she said as soon as Victoria wheeled back to the table. He's always been a jackass, but that was beyond. It's fine, Victoria said, though it wasn't. It's not fine, Marcus interjected. He was completely out of line. For what it's worth, Daniel talks about you constantly, and none of it has anything to do with your chair. It's all Victoria said the funniest thing. Victoria's company just landed this huge contract. Victoria's teaching Sam about dinosaurs. You're not a challenge to him, you're just you. Victoria felt her throat tighten. Thank you. The rest of the dinner was better. They talked about work and parenthood and the frustrations of home renovation. Diane asked if Victoria wanted to feel the baby kick, and Victoria said yes, even though it felt intimate and strange. Daniel's hand stayed on her knee the entire time, a quiet reassurance. Later, back at her apartment, they lay in bed not touching, both staring at the ceiling. I meant what I said, Daniel said into the darkness. I love you. I know. You don't have to say it back. Good. Because I'm not ready. That's okay? She turned her head to look at him. I want to be ready. I want to be the kind of person who can say it without being terrified. But I've been burned before, Daniel. Really badly. And I don't know if I can survive it again. So we take it slow. We're already living in each other's pockets. That's not slow. Then we take it at whatever speed works. He rolled onto his side, propping himself up on one elbow. I'm not asking you to be someone you're not. I'm just asking you to let me stay. What if I can't give you what you need? What do you think I need? She thought about it, really thought about it. Someone who can be a mother to Sam. Someone who can keep up with your life. Someone who isn't constantly fighting their own brain. I need someone who makes me laugh. Someone who challenges me. Someone who gives a damn about the things that matter. You're all of those things. I don't know how to be a mother. Neither did I when Sam was born. I learned. You'll learn too if you want to. What if I don't want to? He was quiet for a long moment. Then we figure that out too. But I think you're selling yourself short. Sam adores you. Sam's 4. He adores everyone who pays attention to him. That's not true. He was weird around Emma's parents for months. With you, he was comfortable from day one. Victoria closed her eyes. This is too much, too fast. We can slow down. Can we? Because it feels like we're already at the point where slowing down means ending things, and I don't want that either. So we don't end things. We just exist like this for a while. No pressure, no expectations. You just told me you love me. That's pressure. It's not. It's just the truth. He reached for her hand in the darkness. I can love you and not need anything back right now. I can wait. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this wouldn't all fall apart the moment things got hard. But trust was a muscle she hadn't exercised in years, and it ached with disuse. I'm going to disappoint you, she whispered. You're not. I am. Eventually, everyone does. Then I'll deal with it when it happens. He pulled her closer. But I don't think you will. I think you're stronger than you give yourself credit for. She let him hold her, let herself sink into the warmth of his body, and tried to quiet the voice in her head that kept waiting for everything to crumble. The next few weeks tested them in small ways. Daniel's car broke down and Victoria drove them everywhere for 3 days while he waited for parts. Sam got sick with a stomach bug and threw up all over Victoria's designer handbag. Victoria had a bad pain day and snapped at Daniel over something trivial, then locked herself in her home office for 6 hours. Daniel forgot their dinner reservation and showed up an hour late covered in sawdust from a project. They fought. Not the big explosive fights Victoria was used to, but the small exhausting ones about dishes left in the sink and schedules that didn't align and different ideas about how to spend a Saturday. They made up, sometimes with words, sometimes with silence, sometimes with sex that felt like communication when language failed. Through it all, Daniel stayed. He didn't leave when Victoria was difficult. He didn't bail when things got messy. He just showed up, day after day, proving through action what his words had promised. It should have made her feel secure. Instead, it made her nervous. Because the longer he stayed, the harder it would be when he inevitably left. And she was certain he would leave. Everyone did eventually. That certainty crystallized into something sharper when Daniel's parents called. Not Daniel directly, but his father, asking if they could meet, just the four of them, to talk. "It's a trap," Victoria said when Daniel told her. "Probably. So we say no." "We could. Or we could go and set some boundaries, make it clear that they don't get a vote in our relationship. They're your parents. They'll always have a vote. Not if I don't let them." He sat down across from her at his kitchen table. Sam was at preschool, the house quiet around them. "Look, I know this is asking a lot, but I want them to see us together, really see us. Not as some problem they need to solve, but as two people who chose each other. What if they can't see that? Then we leave, and we don't look back." She studied his face, looking for doubt, for hesitation. All she saw was determination. "You'd really cut them off? Your own parents? If that's what it takes to protect what we have?" "Yes." "That's a big sacrifice." "It's not a sacrifice, it's a choice. There's a difference." She wanted to argue, but the conviction in his voice stopped her. "Okay, we'll meet them. But the second it goes bad, we're out." "Deal." The meeting was set for the following Sunday at a neutral location, a quiet restaurant in downtown Denver, far enough from their usual haunts to feel less like an ambush. Victoria spent the morning preparing like she was going into battle. Power suit, perfect makeup, every piece of armor she owned. When they arrived, Robert and Margaret were already seated in a corner booth. They stood as Daniel and Victoria approached, and for a moment Victoria thought she saw something like regret cross Margaret's face. But it was gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "Thank you for coming," Robert said as they settled in. "Let's skip the pleasantries," Victoria said. "Why are we here?" Margaret's mouth tightened, but Robert held up a hand. "Fair enough. We wanted to apologize. Our behavior at brunch was inexcusable, and we've had time to reflect on that." "Reflect," Victoria repeated. "That's one way to put it." "We were concerned," Margaret said stiffly, "about Daniel, about our grandson, about the future." "And now you're not concerned anymore? What changed?" "Daniel did." Robert looked at his son. "He made it very clear where his priorities lie. And while we may not fully understand his choices, we respect his right to make them." But Daniel's expression was carefully neutral. "That sounds rehearsed." "It is," Robert admitted. "We've been in therapy, couples counseling, discussing our relationship with you, with Emma's memory, with our expectations for your life." That caught Victoria off guard. "You're in therapy?" "Margaret was resistant at first," Robert said, and his wife shot him a look. "But after our last conversation, I made it clear that if we didn't address some of our patterns, we'd lose our son entirely, and I wasn't willing to accept that." Margaret set down her water glass with more force than necessary. "I still think this is happening too fast. You barely know each other, and there's a child involved, and—" She stopped herself, visibly fighting for control. "But Robert is right. We don't want to lose you, Daniel. And if that means accepting your relationship with Victoria, then we'll do our best." It wasn't exactly a warm welcome, but it was more than Victoria had expected. She glanced at Daniel, trying to gauge his reaction. I appreciate that, Daniel said carefully. But I need to be clear about something. Victoria isn't up for debate. She's not a phase or a mistake I need to recover from. She's the person I'm building a life with. If you can't treat her with respect, real respect, not just tolerance, then we can't have a relationship. We understand, Robert said. Do you? Daniel leaned forward. Because last time, Mom basically called her a burden. She implied that I was making my life harder by choosing to be with her. That's not okay. It will never be okay. Margaret's face went pale, then red. I didn't mean, yes, you did. You meant exactly that. Victoria's voice was steady. And here's the thing, Margaret. I probably am making his life harder in some ways. Accessibility isn't always easy to navigate. People stare, people make assumptions. There are places we can't go, things I can't do. But I'm also making his life better. I make him laugh. I push him to take risks with his work. I care about his kid. So if you're looking for permission to disapprove, you're not going to get it from me. The table fell silent. A waiter appeared to take their orders, and they all ordered mechanically, none of them really looking at the menu. When the waiter left, Margaret spoke again, her voice quieter. I lost a daughter-in-law, Emma. I know I wasn't always kind to her, and I've regretted that every day since she died. I don't want to make the same mistakes twice. Then don't, Daniel said simply. It's not that easy. Yes, it is. You just treat Victoria like a person, like someone I love. That's it. Margaret looked at Victoria for a long moment, and Victoria stared back, refusing to flinch. Finally, Margaret nodded. I'll try. That's all I'm asking, Daniel said. The rest of the lunch was stilted but civil. They talked about safe subjects, Sam's preschool, Daniel's latest project, Victoria's company expansion. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't hostile either. Progress, Victoria supposed, even if it felt fragile. As they were leaving, Robert pulled Daniel aside while Margaret approached Victoria. I wanted to say something, Margaret began, and Victoria braced herself. I know I haven't been welcoming, and I know my reasons aren't good enough, but I want you to know that I see how my son looks at you. He never looked at Emma that way. He loved her, but there was always something dutiful about it. With you, it's different. It's real. Victoria didn't know what to say to that. Thank you? I'm not good at this. At being wrong. At admitting when I've misjudged someone. Margaret's hands twisted together. But I don't want to lose my son. And I don't want my grandson to grow up thinking his grandmother is incapable of change. Change takes time, Victoria said carefully. I know, but I'm willing to put in the work. It was the most human Margaret had been, and despite everything, Victoria found herself softening slightly. Then I'm willing to give you a chance. Margaret nodded, relief visible on her face. They stood there awkwardly for another moment before Daniel and Robert rejoined them, and they said their goodbyes with stiff hugs and promises to do this again soon. In the car on the way back to Boulder, Daniel reached for Victoria's hand. That was something, he said. That was terrifying. But you did it. We did it. She squeezed his hand. Think it'll stick? I don't know. But it's a start. She looked out the window at the mountains rising in the distance, at the highway stretching ahead, and thought about beginnings, about second chances, about the difference between tolerance and acceptance. Your mom said something to me, Victoria said. What? That you never looked at Emma the way you look at me. Daniel was quiet for a moment. She's right. I loved Emma. I'll always love Emma. But with you, it's different. It's real, Victoria finished. Yeah. She turned to look at him, at the way the sunlight caught his profile, at the gentle strength in his hands on the steering wheel. And she thought maybe, just maybe, she was starting to understand what he meant. 2 months later, on a Saturday morning in early October, Victoria woke up to Sam jumping on Daniel's bed while she was still in it. She'd spent the night at his house, something that had become routine enough that she kept a drawer of clothes in his bedroom and a charger on the nightstand. Wake up, wake up, wake up, Sam chanted, bouncing with the kind of energy that should be illegal before 8 in the morning. Daniel groaned and pulled a pillow over his head. Sam, buddy, what have we talked about regarding Saturday mornings? That they're for sleeping in, Sam recited dutifully, still bouncing. But Dad, it's snowing. Victoria cracked one eye open and looked toward the window. Sure enough, fat white flakes were falling steadily, already coating the yard in a thin layer of white. "First snow of the season," Daniel mumbled from under his pillow. "Can we go outside, please, please, please?" "After breakfast," Victoria said, surprising herself. Sam turned his attention to her, his face lighting up. "Will you come too?" She hesitated. Snow meant ice, which meant her chair would be useless in the yard. She'd be stuck inside watching through the window while Daniel and Sam played, the way she'd been stuck watching life happen around her for 2 years. "I don't think," she started. "Please?" Sam's eyes were impossibly wide. "You never play outside with us." The observation stung more than it should have. "That's because my chair doesn't work well in snow, buddy. So don't use your chair. Dad can carry you." Daniel finally emerged from under the pillow, his hair sticking up at odd angles. "Sam, that's not—" "I can carry her," Sam insisted. "Well, Dad can carry her, but I can help. We could build a snowman together, all 3 of us." Victoria looked at Daniel, who looked back at her with a question in his eyes. It would be easy to say no, to stay inside where it was warm and accessible. But Sam was looking at her with such hope, and she was so tired of letting her limitations define what she could and couldn't do. "Okay," she heard herself say, "but I'm not promising I'll be good at this." Sam cheered and launched himself at her for a hug that nearly knocked her over. Daniel caught them both, laughing, and for a moment they were just a tangle of limbs and warmth. An hour later, Victoria found herself bundled in Daniel's oversized winter coat, being carried through the back door into a yard blanketed in white. Daniel set her down on a lawn chair he'd cleared off, and Sam immediately started gathering snow for their snowman. "You okay?" Daniel asked quietly, crouching beside her. "Ask me in 10 minutes when I can't feel my legs anymore." "That's not what I meant." She knew what he meant. "I'm okay. It's weird, but okay. We can go inside whenever you want." "I know." She looked at Sam, who was already covered in snow and grinning like a maniac. "But let's give him a few minutes first." They built a lopsided snowman with a carrot nose and rocks for eyes. Sam insisted on making it as tall as possible, which resulted in Daniel lifting him up repeatedly to place the head. Victoria contributed by forming the snowballs and critiquing their construction technique, which made Sam giggle every time she declared something structurally unsound. "You sound like an architect," Daniel said, packing snow around the base. "I sound like someone who dates an architect." "Same thing." Sam decided the snowman needed a family, which led to an hour of building smaller snow people of various sizes. Victoria's fingers were numb inside her gloves, and she'd lost feeling in her feet 20 minutes ago, but Sam's joy was infectious. When he declared their snow family complete, he stood back to admire his work with his hands on his hips, mimicking Daniel's stance so perfectly that Victoria had to bite back a laugh. "I think we need hot chocolate now," Daniel announced. "With marshmallows?" Sam asked. "Obviously with marshmallows. What kind of barbarians do you think we are?" Inside, while Daniel made hot chocolate and Sam changed out of his wet clothes, Victoria sat in her chair by the window watching the snow fall. Her body ached from the cold, from the unfamiliar positions, from the effort of doing something she hadn't done in years. But underneath the discomfort was something else, something that felt dangerously close to happiness. Daniel brought her a mug topped with a mountain of marshmallows. "You're smiling." "I'm cold." "You're smiling," he repeated, settling onto the couch beside her chair. "It's nice. Don't get used to it." Too late. He took a sip of his hot chocolate, getting marshmallow on his upper lip. "Thank you for today. For trying." Sam's hard to say no to. It wasn't just for Sam. His voice was quiet, serious. "You didn't have to do that, but you did, and it meant something, to both of us." Before she could respond, Sam thundered down the stairs in fresh clothes, demanding his hot chocolate, and launching into a detailed plan for an even bigger snow fort tomorrow. Victoria let the conversation wash over her, watching the two of them interact with an ease that came from years of practice. Later that night, after Sam had fallen asleep on the couch during a movie, and Daniel had carried him to bed, Victoria found herself still thinking about the snowman, about how easily she'd been included, how naturally it had felt to be part of their small family unit, even for an afternoon. "You're thinking too hard," Daniel said, returning to the living room. "I'm always thinking too hard." He sat down beside her chair, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. What about? Today, Sam, this. She gestured vaguely between them. How easy it's getting. That's a bad thing? It scares me. The easier it gets, the harder it'll be when what? When I leave? When I change my mind? He reached for her hand. Victoria, I need you to hear me. I'm not going anywhere. How many times do I have to prove that before you believe it? I don't know. Maybe forever. Then I'll spend forever proving it. He pulled her from the chair onto the couch beside him, maneuvering her carefully until she was tucked against his side. I love you. I love how you challenge me. I love how you make Sam think about the world differently. I love that you're terrible at building snowmen, but you tried anyway. I love that you're scared, but you keep showing up. She closed her eyes, letting his words sink in. I'm not good at this, at being part of something. You're better at it than you think. Sam asked me the other day if I was going to be his new mom. Daniel tensed. What did you say? I told him I didn't know, that I wasn't sure what I was going to be. She felt Daniel's chest rise and fall beneath her cheek. He seemed okay with that answer. Said his friend Jackson has 2 dads and no mom, and his friend Mia has a mom and a stepdad and a bonus mom, and families can look like lots of different things. He's not wrong. I know, but Daniel, I don't know if I can be what he needs, what you both need. I've never wanted kids. I built my whole life around my career, around being independent, and now I'm supposed to just figure out how to be a parental figure? You don't have to be anything you don't want to be. If you want to be Victoria, who dates his dad and is around sometimes, that's fine. If you want to be more than that, that's fine too. There's no rule book here. She tilted her head to look up at him. What do you want? Honestly, I want you here, in whatever capacity you're comfortable with. I want to wake up next to you. I want to split the grocery shopping and argue about whose turn it is to take out the trash. I want Sam to have someone else in his life who cares about him. I want us to build something together that doesn't look like anyone else's relationship because it's ours. That sounds like marriage. Eventually, maybe. If you want that. He paused. Do you want that? Victoria's heart was racing. They'd been together 4 months. 4 months wasn't long enough to make this kind of decision, wasn't long enough to upend her entire life. Except it felt like longer. It felt like she'd known Daniel for years, like Sam had always been part of her world. Ask me again in 6 months, she said finally. Okay. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. But for the record, my answer is going to be the same in 6 months, and a year from now, and 5 years from now. You can't know that. Watch me. They fell asleep on the couch, tangled together, the TV playing quietly in the background. When Victoria woke up a few hours later with a crick in her neck and her legs at an uncomfortable angle, Daniel was still holding her like she might disappear if he let go. The following Monday, Victoria's carefully constructed world started to crack. It began with a phone call from her CFO, Marcus Chen, requesting an emergency board meeting. When she pressed for details, his voice was tense in a way she'd never heard before. We need to discuss some concerns that have been raised about your capacity to lead the company. Victoria's blood went cold. Concerns from whom? Several board members. I'd rather discuss this in person. Marcus, we've worked together for 6 years. Tell me what's happening. He sighed. Patricia Westbrook has been calling board members. She's raising questions about your judgment, about your personal life affecting your professional decisions, and some people are listening. Patricia. Of course. Victoria's ex-fiancé's mother had been quiet for too long. She should have known it wouldn't last. What exactly is she saying? That you've become distracted, that your focus has shifted away from the company, that you're making decisions based on emotion rather than logic. He paused. She's also implying that your relationship with Daniel Hayes represents a liability. A liability. Her words, not mine. Look, Victoria, you know I'm on your side, but we need to address this head on. The board meeting is scheduled for Wednesday at 9. Come prepared. Victoria hung up and sat very still, staring at the city skyline outside her office window. She'd built Sterling Innovations from nothing, had fought tooth and nail to keep it after her accident, had proven herself over and over again. And now Patricia was trying to take it away because Victoria had dared to be happy. Her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Lunch today? Sam wants to show you his art project. She stared at the message, feeling something twist in her chest. This was exactly what Patricia would use against her, proof that Victoria was prioritizing her personal life over the company. Never mind that she worked 60-hour weeks, that Sterling Innovations had posted record profits for 3 consecutive quarters, that she'd successfully launched 2 new product lines in the past year alone. Can't today. Work crisis. I'll call you later. She didn't call later. She stayed at the office until midnight, pulling files, reviewing every decision she'd made in the past 6 months, looking for anything Patricia could weaponize against her. Rachel brought her dinner and coffee and didn't ask questions, which Victoria appreciated. Tuesday was worse. 2 board members called to discuss concerns, which really meant to warn her that they were considering Patricia's suggestions. One of them, Gerald Morrison, who'd been with the company since the beginning, actually asked if she was emotionally stable enough to handle the pressures of leadership. Victoria had very calmly told him that her emotional stability was none of his concern, that her performance spoke for itself, and that if he had questions about her leadership, he could voice them at the board meeting like a professional. Then she'd hung up and thrown her stapler across the room. By Tuesday night, she still hadn't called Daniel. He texted 3 times, each message a little more concerned than the last. She knew she should respond, should tell him what was happening, but every time she tried to type out an explanation, the words felt like admitting defeat. Finally, around 10, her phone rang with a call instead of a text. "You're avoiding me," Daniel said without preamble. "I'm dealing with something at work." For 2 days straight without a single phone call? It's complicated. Then uncomplicate it. Talk to me. Victoria closed her eyes, pressing her fingers against her temples where a headache had been building all day. "My ex-fiance's mother is trying to get me removed from my own company." Silence on the other end. Then, "What?" "She's been calling board members, raising concerns about my leadership, about my judgment. She's making it sound like I'm too distracted by my personal life to run the company effectively." "That's insane. You're the most focused person I know." "That's not how she's framing it. She's saying I've changed since we started dating, that I'm making emotional decisions instead of logical ones." "Are you?" The question caught her off guard. "What? Are you making emotional decisions? Because from where I'm standing, you seem more balanced than you were when we met. Happier, less likely to work yourself into the ground." "That's exactly the problem, Daniel. I built my reputation on being ruthless, on caring about nothing except the company. If people think I've gone soft..." "Gone soft? Jesus, Victoria, you're allowed to have a life outside of work." "Not if it costs me everything I've built." Another silence, longer this time. When Daniel spoke again, his voice was careful. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I have a board meeting Wednesday morning that could determine whether I keep my company or lose it. And I need to go into that meeting looking like the same Victoria Sterling they've always known. Focused, dedicated, uncompromising. And being with me makes you look unfocused. Being with anyone makes me look unfocused, but especially being with you." She hated saying it, hated the way the words tasted. "Patricia's going to bring up your situation, the fact that you're a single parent, that you have needs and demands on your time. She's going to paint me as someone who's taking on responsibilities that will pull my attention away from the company." "So what do you want to do? Pretend I don't exist? Tell everyone we broke up?" "I don't know. I need to get through Wednesday first." "And then what? We go back to normal? Or do you decide that I'm too much of a liability and end this?" "That's not fair." "Well, none of this is fair, Victoria. I've been trying to reach you for 2 days. Sam's been asking why you haven't called, and now you're telling me that the life we've been building together is a problem that needs to be managed." "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." His voice was flat now, emotionless. "Look, I get it. Your company is important. It's your life's work. But I need to know where I stand, where we stand, because I can't keep doing this if every time something goes wrong, you shut me out. I'm not shutting you out. I'm trying to protect what I've built." By pushing away everyone who cares about you, that's not protection, Victoria. That's isolation. She wanted to argue, wanted to explain that he didn't understand the kind of pressure she was under, the scrutiny she faced every single day. But the words wouldn't come, because deep down she knew he was right. "I have to go," she said quietly. "I'll call you after the meeting." "Will you, though?" "Yes." "Okay?" He didn't sound like he believed her. Good luck Wednesday. He hung up before she could respond. Victoria sat in her dark office, staring at her phone, feeling the familiar walls closing in around her. This was why she didn't let people in. This was why relationships were dangerous, because the moment you gave someone the power to matter, they could be used against you. Wednesday morning arrived gray and cold. Victoria dressed in her sharpest suit, pulled her hair back severely, and practiced her opening statement in the mirror. She looked like the woman who'd built sterling innovations from nothing. She looked like someone who didn't need anyone. The board meeting started exactly on time. 12 faces around a long table, most of them familiar, a few newer additions that Patricia had probably been courting for months. Gerald Morrison sat at the far end, looking uncomfortable. Marcus Chen sat to Victoria's right, a folder of financials in front of him. Patricia wasn't there. She'd never been on the board, but her influence hung over the room like smoke. Gerald cleared his throat. I think we all know why we're here. Some concerns have been raised about the direction of the company, about leadership decisions, about priorities. Victoria, we'd like to give you an opportunity to address these concerns directly. Victoria folded her hands on the table. I'd be happy to. But first, I'd like to know who specifically raised these concerns and what evidence they're basing them on. Silence. A few board members shifted uncomfortably. The concerns were raised confidentially, Gerald said, by Patricia Westbrook. More shifting. Gerald's face reddened slightly. Mrs. Westbrook is a major shareholder, and Mrs. Westbrook is my ex-fiance's mother who has been bitter about my success since before my accident. She has no operational involvement in this company, no expertise in our field, and a personal vendetta against me. So I'll ask again, what specific evidence is being used to question my leadership? Marcus slid the folder across the table. For the record, the numbers speak for themselves. Revenue is up 18% year over year. We've launched 2 successful product lines. Client retention is at an all-time high. Employee satisfaction scores have actually improved in the past 6 months. By every measurable metric, Victoria's leadership has been exemplary. The concerns aren't about the numbers, another board member, Janet Reeves, said carefully. They're about sustainability, about whether the current pace can be maintained given other commitments. Other commitments, Victoria repeated. You mean my personal life? Janet had the grace to look uncomfortable. We're simply asking whether you've taken on additional responsibilities that might affect your ability to dedicate yourself fully to the company. Such as? Well, we understand you've been spending considerable time with someone who has a young child. That's a significant commitment. Victoria felt ice run through her veins. Let me be very clear about something. My personal life has never interfered with my professional performance. I'm at the office before most of you arrive and I leave after you're gone. I respond to emails at all hours. I've never missed a deadline, never failed to deliver on a commitment, never let this company down. The fact that I choose to have a relationship outside of work, something I might add that every other person at this table also has, is irrelevant. But it's different when... Janet stopped herself. When what? When I'm in a wheelchair? When the person I'm dating is a single parent? Say it plainly, Janet. When you're the CEO, Janet finished, though everyone knew that wasn't what she'd meant. The demands on your time are different. Victoria stood up, which required her to grip the table for support, but was worth it for the effect. I have spent 2 years proving to this board that I can run this company from a wheelchair. I've exceeded every goal, overcome every obstacle, and built something we can all be proud of. The fact that Patricia Westbrook has convinced some of you that having a personal life makes me unfit to lead is insulting, not just to me, but to every woman who's been told she can't have both a career and a relationship. No one's saying you can't have both, Gerald interjected. Then what are you saying? Because it sounds like you're saying that unless I'm willing to be alone and miserable, I'm not committed enough to this company. And if that's the standard we're setting, I'd like to know which of you is willing to give up your marriages and families to meet it. The room fell silent. Victoria looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes in turn. I love this company, she said quietly. I built it from nothing. I bled for it. I sacrificed for it. And I will continue to lead it to the best of my ability. But I will not apologize for also choosing to have a life. If that's not acceptable to this board, then perhaps we need to have a different conversation about my future here. She sat back down, her heart pounding. It was a gamble, threatening to leave when Patricia was probably hoping to push her out anyway. But she was tired of defending her existence, tired of proving herself over and over again. Marcus spoke up. I move that we table this discussion until Mrs. Westbrook can provide specific evidence of leadership failures. Vague concerns based on personal bias aren't grounds for questioning a CEO's position. Seconded, said David Kim, another board member who'd been quiet until now. Gerald looked around the table. All in favor? 8 hands went up, 4 abstained, none opposed. Motion carries, Gerald said. Victoria, we appreciate your candor. I think we can all agree that this discussion was premature. We'll revisit only if concrete concerns arise. Victoria nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The meeting adjourned and board members filed out quickly, avoiding her eyes. Only Marcus stayed behind. That was risky, he said. I know. But effective. You reminded them why they hired you in the first place. He gathered his papers. For what it's worth, I think you're doing a great job balancing everything. Don't let Patricia or anyone else convince you otherwise. After he left, Victoria sat alone in the conference room, feeling hollowed out. She'd won, for now. But the fight had cost her something. She'd spent the past 2 days so focused on protecting her company that she'd pushed away the one person who actually mattered. She pulled out her phone and stared at Daniel's contact. It was just past 11. He'd be at work, probably on a job site somewhere. But she called anyway. He answered on the 3rd ring. Hey. Hey. Her voice cracked slightly. I'm sorry. How'd the meeting go? I kept my job. Barely. That's good. Daniel, I'm really sorry for shutting you out, for making you feel like you were a problem instead of... She stopped, the words catching in her throat. Instead of what? Instead of the best thing that's happened to me in years. He was quiet for a long moment. Are you okay? No. I'm sitting in an empty conference room realizing that I almost threw away something important because I was scared. You didn't throw it away. You just made it harder than it needed to be. I know, I do that. She closed her eyes. I love you. The words came out before she could stop them, raw and unplanned. She heard Daniel's sharp intake of breath on the other end. Say that again. I love you. I'm terrible at showing it, and I'm going to keep messing this up, but I love you. And I'm sorry it took almost losing everything to figure out how to say it. Victoria, that I know it's messy. I know I'm messy, but I don't want to do this without you, any of it. And I know that's asking a lot given that I've been a nightmare for the past 2 days. Victoria, stop. His voice was gentle. I love you too. Even when you're being a nightmare. Especially when you're being a nightmare. She laughed, wet and shaky. That's a terrible standard. Oh, lucky for you, I have terrible standards. She could hear the smile in his voice. Can I see you tonight? Yes, please. My place or yours? Yours. I want to see Sam. I want to apologize to both of you. You don't have to apologize to Sam. He doesn't really understand what happened. I disappeared for 2 days without explanation. He deserves better than that. Okay, Daniel said softly. Come over whenever you're ready. We'll be here. That evening, Victoria showed up at Daniel's house with takeout Chinese food and a stuffed dinosaur for Sam. He opened the door before she could knock, launching himself at her for a hug. You're back, he exclaimed. I'm back. I'm sorry I've been away. Dad said you were busy with work stuff. I was. But that's not an excuse for not calling. She handed him the dinosaur. This is an apology, T-Rex. Sam's eyes went wide. He's perfect. I'm going to name him Reginald. That's a very sophisticated name for a dinosaur. I know. He ran off to introduce Reginald to his other toys, leaving Victoria and Daniel alone in the doorway. Hi, Daniel said. Hi. She wheeled closer. I meant what I said earlier, all of it. I know you did. He leaned down and kissed her, slow and sweet. But we're going to have to work on your communication skills. I know. And your tendency to shut down when things get hard. I know. And your habit of assuming the worst about everything. Okay, I get it. I'm a work in progress. He smiled. Aren't we all? They ate dinner at the kitchen table, Sam chattering about his day at preschool and his plans for Reginald the T-Rex. After dinner, while Daniel gave Sam a bath, Victoria sat in the living room surrounded by toys and children's books and the comfortable chaos of their life. This was what Patricia couldn't stand. The idea that Victoria could have this. That she could be successful and powerful and still come home to plastic dinosaurs and sticky fingerprints on the coffee table. That she could be both the CEO who commanded boardrooms and the woman who built snowmen in the backyard. When Sam was in bed and the house was quiet, Daniel joined her on the couch. "I talked to my therapist about you," he said. "That sounds ominous." It wasn't. I told her about the past few days, about how you shut down when you got scared. She said that's pretty normal for people who've been hurt before. Did she say it was fixable? She said it's workable, that relationships are about learning each other's patterns and finding ways to work through them together. He took her hand. "I know you're going to pull away sometimes. I know you're going to panic when things feel too good. But I need you to try, really try, to let me in when that happens, instead of shutting me out." "I'll try," she said. "I can't promise I'll be good at it right away." "I'm not asking you to be good at it. I'm asking you to try." "Okay." She leaned against him, feeling his warmth, his solidity. "Thank you for not giving up on me. I told you, I'm not going anywhere." And this time, finally, Victoria let herself believe it. The weeks that followed felt like learning to breathe underwater. Difficult at first, then gradually becoming something Victoria's body remembered how to do. She started keeping a toothbrush at Daniel's house, then a change of clothes, then half her work files because she answered emails from his kitchen table more often than her own desk. Sam stopped asking when she was coming over and started asking when she was leaving, which felt like progress even when it terrified her. December arrived with bitter cold and the kind of darkness that settled over Boulder by 4:30 in the afternoon. Victoria was working late on a Friday, reviewing contracts for a new partnership with a medical device manufacturer, when Rachel knocked on her office door. "You have a visitor," Rachel said, her expression carefully neutral in a way that meant trouble. "Who?" "James Westbrook." Victoria's hand stilled on her keyboard. Her ex-fiancé, the man who'd left her 3 weeks after her accident, who'd packed his things while she was still learning to transfer from bed to wheelchair, who told her he couldn't handle this version of her life. "Tell him I'm busy?" "I did. He says he'll wait." Victoria closed her eyes, counting to 10. "Fine. Send him in." James walked into her office like he still belonged there, all tailored suit and expensive haircut, and the kind of confidence that came from never having to fight for anything. He'd aged well, no gray in his dark hair, no lines around his eyes. It made Victoria irrationally angry. "Victoria," he said, like they were old friends, "you look good." "What do you want, James?" He settled into the chair across from her desk without being invited. "My mother's been causing problems for you." "I'm aware." I wanted to apologize and to ask her to back off. Victoria laughed, short and bitter. "You wanted to ask her? That's generous of you." "I know she's out of line. The board meeting, the phone calls, it's not right. And yet she's still doing it. Because I haven't stopped her yet." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "But I will, if you want me to." "What's the catch?" "No catch. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Victoria used to find endearing. "I made a mistake, leaving you. I've regretted it every day for 2 years." The words hung in the air between them. Victoria stared at him, trying to process what he'd just said. "You regret leaving me?" "Yes. The version of me that was too difficult to handle. The one you said you couldn't build a life with." His face reddened. "I was scared. I didn't know how to help you, didn't know what you needed. I panicked. So you ran." "So I ran," he admitted. "And I've spent 2 years watching you build an empire while I'm stuck in my father's company doing work I hate, married to a woman I don't love, living a life that looks perfect on paper and feels empty." He met her eyes. "I want to fix this. I want us to try again." Victoria felt like she'd been punched. "You're married." "I'm getting divorced. Papers are already filed." "And you think, what? That I've just been waiting around for you to come to your senses?" "No. I know you've moved on. I know about Daniel Hayes." His mouth tightened slightly. "But I also know that you and I made sense once. We could make sense again." "We never made sense, James. We just looked good together in photos." "That's not true." Yes, it is. Victoria wheeled around her desk so nothing was between them. You loved the idea of me, the successful, beautiful girlfriend who made you look progressive and modern. But the second I stopped being easy, the second I needed something from you, you bailed. So don't sit in my office and tell me you made a mistake. You made a choice, and I've moved on. With a single father who can barely support himself, let alone someone with your needs. Stop. Her voice was ice. You don't get to do that. You don't get to judge my choices after the choice you made. I'm trying to help you see clearly. My mother's right about one thing. You've changed since you started seeing him. You're softer, less focused. I'm happier, Victoria corrected. There's a difference. Are you? Or are you just settling because you think this is the best you can do now? The words hit like a slap. Victoria felt her chest constrict, felt all her old insecurities rise up to meet James's accusations. Because wasn't that what she'd been afraid of all along? That Daniel was with her out of pity, that she was accepting less than she deserved because she thought her options were limited? Get out, she said quietly. Victoria, get out of my office, get out of my life, and tell your mother that if she comes after me or my company again, I will bury her so deep in legal action she'll wish she'd never heard my name. James stood up slowly. You're making a mistake. The only mistake I made was wasting 3 years on you. She wheeled to the door and opened it. Rachel will show you out. After he left, Victoria sat in her office for a long time, staring at nothing. James's words kept echoing in her head, settling, less focused. The best you can do now? All the fears she'd tried to bury came rushing back, sharper than before. Her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Sam wants to know if you're coming for movie night. I told him to ask you directly, so here it is. Are you coming for movie night? His words, my caps lock. She stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. It would be easy to say yes, to show up at Daniel's house and lose herself in the comfortable routine they'd built. But James's visit had shaken something loose inside her, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she needed space to think. Not tonight. Work stuff. Sorry. The response came quickly. Everything okay? Fine. Just tired. Okay. Call me if you need anything. She didn't call. She stayed at the office until after midnight, then drove home to her empty apartment where everything was clean and organized and exactly as she'd left it. No toys on the floor, no dishes in the sink, no evidence that anyone else existed in her world. She should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt hollow. Saturday morning, Rachel called her at 8. Please tell me you're not at the office. I'm at home. Liar. I can hear the elevator. Victoria had indeed just arrived at Sterling Innovations, coffee in hand, ready to bury herself in work. I have things to do. You have a problem, Rachel corrected. James Westbrook shows up and suddenly you're running away from the best thing that's happened to you. I'm not running away. I'm working. On a Saturday. After working until midnight on a Friday. When you're supposed to be at Daniel's house watching movies with him and Sam. Rachel's voice softened. What did James say to you? Nothing that matters. Then why are you avoiding Daniel? I'm not avoiding him. I need time to think. About what? Victoria set down her coffee, staring out at the city spread below her office windows. About whether James was right. About whether I'm settling. Victoria, you're not settling, you're in love. There's a difference. How do you know? Because I've worked for you for 6 years and I've never seen you like this. Happy, relaxed, like you're actually living instead of just surviving. Rachel paused. James Westbrook is a coward who left when things got hard and now regrets it. Don't let him poison what you have with Daniel. What if he's right, though? What if I have changed? What if I'm not as sharp as I used to be? You just posted the best quarter in company history. You landed the Brennan contract that everyone said was impossible. You're sharper than ever. You're just not miserable anymore. And apparently that scares you more than being alone did. The observation was too accurate to dismiss. Victoria closed her eyes. I don't know how to do this, Rachel. How to be both things at once. The CEO and the girlfriend and the person Sam is starting to call his bonus mom. So don't be both things at once. Be all of it. Be complicated and messy and human. Rachel's voice was firm. Now get out of that office and go talk to Daniel. before you sabotage the one good thing in your life. Victoria wanted to argue, but Rachel hung up before she could. She sat in her office for another 20 minutes, then grabbed her coat and left. Daniel's car was in the driveway when she arrived. Through the front window, she could see him and Sam building something with Legos, both of them focused and serious. It looked peaceful. It looked like home. She almost turned around and left. But then Sam looked up and saw her through the window, his face breaking into a huge grin. He said something to Daniel, who turned toward the window. Their eyes met, and Victoria saw the question there, the same question she'd been asking herself for 2 days. She wheeled up the ramp and knocked. Daniel opened the door, Sam peering around his legs. "You said you couldn't come," Sam said accusingly. "I changed my mind. Can I come in?" Sam looked at Daniel, who nodded. "Yeah, but you missed breakfast. Dad made pancakes." "Were they good?" "They were okay. He only burned 2. "That's progress," Victoria said, following them inside. Sam immediately returned to his Lego project, leaving her and Daniel standing in the entryway. "Work stuff resolved?" Daniel asked carefully. "There was no work stuff. I lied." His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "Okay. James came to see me yesterday, my ex-fiancé." "I know who James is." "Right. He came to apologize, and to tell me he wants to try again." Victoria watched Daniel's jaw tighten. "I told him no, obviously, but he said some things that got in my head." "What kind of things?" "That I've changed since we started dating, that I'm less focused, less sharp, that I'm settling for less than I deserve because my options are limited now." Daniel's face went very still. "Do you believe that?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to say no, that he's wrong, that you and I make sense, but another part of me wonders if he has a point, if I'm compromising who I am to fit into your life." "Are you?" His voice was quiet, controlled. "Because from where I'm standing, you're exactly who you've always been. Brilliant, driven, occasionally terrifying. The only difference is you're not alone anymore." "Maybe that's the problem. Maybe I'm better alone." Daniel flinched like she'd hit him. "Is that what you really think? Or is that what James wants you to think?" "I don't know." The words came out louder than she intended. In the living room, Sam's Lego building paused. Victoria lowered her voice. "I don't know what I think anymore. I spent 2 years building walls to protect myself, and then you came along and knocked them all down, and now I feel exposed all the time, vulnerable, and I hate it." "Vulnerability isn't weakness, Victoria. It feels like weakness. It feels like giving someone the power to destroy me. I'm not going to destroy you. You can't promise that. Nobody can." She gripped her wheels hard enough that her knuckles went white. "Emma died. Your parents judged you. James left me. People leave, Daniel. People always leave." "So you're leaving first? Is that what this is?" "I don't know what this is. I need to figure out if I'm doing this for the right reasons. If we're doing this for the right reasons." Daniel was quiet for a long moment, his hands shoved in his pockets, his shoulders tense. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "You know what? I'm tired of convincing you that I'm not going to leave. I've told you 100 times. I've shown you through my actions. I've chosen you over and over again. At some point, Victoria, you have to choose to believe it, or you have to let me go." "That's not fair." "None of this is fair, but I can't keep waiting for you to trust me. I can't keep proving myself while you look for reasons to run." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "I love you. I want to build a life with you, but I need you to want that too. Not despite your fear, but in spite of it. And if you can't do that, if you're always going to have one foot out the door, then maybe James is right. Maybe we don't make sense." The words hung between them like broken glass. Victoria felt tears burning behind her eyes, but refused to let them fall. "I should go," she said quietly. "Yeah, maybe you should." She turned her chair toward the door, her chest so tight she could barely breathe. She made it halfway down the ramp before Sam's voice stopped her. "Victoria, wait!" He ran down the ramp in his socks, no coat despite the cold. "Are you leaving because of me?" "No, buddy. This isn't about you." "But you're leaving. People always leave when they're mad at Dad." The observation broke something inside her. She looked at this 4-year-old who'd already lost his mother, who'd watched people drift away from his father's life, who was now watching her do the same thing. "I'm not mad at your dad," she said carefully. I'm just scared. Of what? Of a lot of things. Of getting hurt. Of not being good enough. Of letting you both down. Sam considered this seriously. Dad says being scared is okay. He says brave people are scared too. They just do the thing anyway. Your dad is very wise. So are you going to do the thing anyway? Or are you going to run away like my grandma said people would? Victoria stared at him. Your grandma said that? I heard her tell Dad that nobody would stay because we're too much work, that he should give up on finding someone. Sam's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Are we too much work? Oh, Sam. Victoria pulled him into a hug, not caring that his weight was awkward against her chair. You're not too much work. You're perfect exactly as you are. Then why are you leaving? It was the simplest question in the world, and Victoria didn't have a good answer. She was leaving because she was terrified, because James had poked at her deepest insecurities and she'd let him, because it was easier to run than to stay and risk being hurt. But looking at Sam's tear-stained face, she realized something. She wasn't the only one who would be hurt if she left. She wasn't the only one taking a risk here. Daniel had opened his life to her, had let her into his home, had trusted her with his son's heart. And Sam, who'd already lost so much, was offering her something precious and fragile. The question wasn't whether she was settling or compromising or changing. The question was whether she was brave enough to choose love over fear. She looked over Sam's shoulder and saw Daniel standing in the doorway, watching them. His expression was guarded but hopeful, and she realized he was just as scared as she was. He'd lost Emma. He'd been judged and abandoned and told his life was too complicated for anyone to want, and he was still choosing to try. I'm not leaving, Victoria said, and meant it. I'm scared and I'm probably going to mess this up a dozen more times, but I'm not leaving. Sam pulled back to look at her. Promise? I promise. He hugged her again, then ran back into the house, yelling something about showing her his Lego spaceship. Victoria wheeled up the ramp to where Daniel stood. I'm sorry, she said. For running. For letting James get in my head. For making this harder than it needs to be. I'm sorry too. For giving you an ultimatum. For losing my patience. He crouched down beside her chair. I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But I meant what I said. I need you to choose this. Choose us. Not perfectly, not without fear, but deliberately. I choose you, Victoria said. Both of you, even though it terrifies me. Even though I'm going to be bad at this sometimes. We'll be bad at it together. She leaned forward and kissed him, slow and sure, and felt something settle inside her chest. Not the absence of fear. She'd probably always be a little afraid of losing this. But the certainty that it was worth the risk. When they broke apart, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. I need to tell you something. Okay. I was going to wait. Do this whole romantic thing, but I don't want to wait anymore. He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it. Inside was a simple silver ring with a small diamond. I bought this 3 weeks ago. I've been carrying it around like an idiot, waiting for the perfect moment. But there is no perfect moment with us. We're messy and complicated and we fight too much. So I'm just going to ask, Victoria Sterling, will you marry me? Victoria stared at the ring, her heart hammering. You bought this before the board meeting? Before the fight with James? I bought it the day after you told Sam you weren't leaving, when he asked if you were going to be his bonus mom, and you said you'd have to see, but you hoped so. Daniel's voice was rough. I knew then that I wanted to do this forever. All of it. The good parts and the hard parts and everything in between. That's insane. We've only been together 6 months. I know. Your parents are going to have opinions. I don't care. Sam might not be ready for this. Sam's been asking me when you're moving in. I think he's ready. Victoria looked at the ring, then at Daniel's face, then at the house behind him where Sam was probably building something elaborate and explaining it to himself in a running commentary. She thought about her empty apartment downtown, about her perfect organized life that had felt more like a prison than freedom. She thought about James's words, settling, compromising, less than she deserved. But this wasn't less. This was more complicated, more scary, more real than anything she'd ever had. This was choosing to build something with another person instead of doing it alone. This was trusting that she was worth staying for, that her life had value beyond her company, that she could be both successful and in love. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you." Daniel's face broke into a grin so wide it hurt to look at. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, which meant he'd somehow figured out her size, and kissed her again. Sam burst out the door. "Did she say yes? Dad, did she say yes?" "She said yes!" Sam cheered and jumped on them both, nearly knocking Victoria out of her chair. They ended up in a tangled pile of limbs and laughter on the ramp, and Victoria thought this was probably the most undignified engagement in history. It was perfect. The wedding planning was exactly as chaotic as Victoria expected. Margaret had opinions about everything: the venue, the guest list, the flowers, the music. Sam insisted on being the ring bearer and also wanted to bring Reginald the T-Rex. Rachel took over most of the logistics while Victoria focused on not having a panic attack about the whole thing. They settled on a small ceremony by the lake in early spring, just close family and friends. Victoria wore a dress that had been tailored to accommodate her chair, and Sam wore a tiny suit that made him look absurdly grown up. Daniel cried during his vows, which made Victoria cry, which made Sam announce loudly that everyone was crying, and was that normal? The reception was held at a restaurant with ramped access and tables spaced wide enough for wheelchairs. Marcus and Diane came, bringing their newborn daughter, who slept through most of the evening. Daniel's parents were stiff but polite, Margaret actually complimenting Victoria's dress without any veiled criticisms. Rachel gave a toast about how Victoria had finally learned that being strong didn't mean being alone. Patricia Westbrook didn't come. She hadn't been invited, but she sent a gift anyway. A crystal vase with a card that said, "Congratulations on your new beginning." Victoria donated the vase to charity and threw away the card. During the first dance, Daniel lifted Victoria from her chair and held her as they swayed to music, her arms around his neck, her feet dangling uselessly, but somehow it didn't matter. Sam cut in halfway through, demanding his own dance, and Victoria held him while Daniel spun them both in slow circles. Later, when the guests had left and it was just the three of them in Daniel's car driving home, their home now, officially, Sam fell asleep in the back seat clutching Reginald. Victoria looked at her ring, at Daniel's hand on her knee, at the mountain silhouetted against the darkening sky. "Are you happy?" Daniel asked quietly. She thought about the question seriously. Happiness had always felt like something other people got to have, something that required being whole and undamaged and easy. But sitting here with her new husband and her bonus son, she realized happiness wasn't about being perfect. It was about being chosen and choosing in return. "Yeah," she said, "I really am." The months that followed weren't always easy. Victoria still had bad pain days where getting out of bed felt impossible. Sam still had nightmares about losing people. Daniel still struggled with balancing work and parenting and marriage. They fought about money and schedules and whose turn it was to do the dishes. Victoria's company faced new challenges that required her attention. Margaret still made passive-aggressive comments at family dinners. But they figured it out. Victoria learned to ask for help instead of suffering in silence. Daniel learned to give her space when she needed it, without assuming she was pulling away. Sam started calling Victoria Vic instead of her full name, which somehow felt more intimate than any title could be. 1 year after the wedding, they stood in the same spot by the lake where they'd gotten married. Sam was 5 now, more confident and talkative than ever. He ran ahead to throw rocks in the water while Victoria and Daniel sat on a bench watching. "I've been thinking," Daniel said. "Dangerous. About expanding the family." Victoria looked at him sharply. "What?" "Not like that. I mean, Sam's been asking about siblings, and I know that's complicated with us, but I thought maybe we could look into adoption, or fostering, if you wanted." Victoria's first instinct was to say no, that she could barely handle being a parent to one child, that adding more would be impossible. But then she thought about how far she'd come, about how much her life had expanded since letting Daniel and Sam in. "That's terrifying," she said. "I know. And complicated. I know. And it would mean even less sleep and more chaos and probably judgment from people who think we're crazy." "Probably." He took her hand. "But I think we could do it. If you wanted to." She watched Sam try to skip rocks, his technique terrible, but his enthusiasm boundless. She thought about how much love she had in her life now, how much it had cost her to open herself up to it, and how worth it that cost had been. "Let's talk about it," she said finally. "Really talk about it. Not decide today, but explore the possibility." Daniel kissed her temple. "That's all I'm asking." They sat there for a while longer, watching the sun set over the water, and Victoria realized this was her life now. Not the one she'd planned, not the one she'd thought she wanted, but the one she'd built brick by brick with two people who loved her exactly as she was, messy and scared and imperfect and whole. Sam ran back to them, breathless and covered in mud. "Can we get ice cream?" "It's almost dinner time," Daniel said. "So? Ice cream can be dinner." Victoria laughed. "You're going to be a terrible influence on any siblings we might have." "Siblings?" Sam's eyes went wide. "Are we getting a baby?" "We're talking about maybe fostering an older kid someday," Daniel said carefully. "But that's just talking. Nothing's decided." "Cool. I'd be a good big brother." Sam considered this seriously. "I'd teach them about dinosaurs and how to build Legos, and how Victoria uses her wheelchair to do cool tricks in the kitchen." "I don't do tricks," Victoria protested. "You totally do. You did that spinny thing last week when you were making cookies." Daniel grinned. "She does do a spinny thing." "It's called being efficient." They bickered good-naturedly all the way to the car, and Victoria realized this was what love looked like in practice. Not perfect romantic moments, but ice cream debates and muddy shoes and someone remembering that you did a spinny thing in the kitchen. It was choosing each other on the hard days and the boring days and all the days in between. That night, after Sam was asleep and the house was quiet, Victoria and Daniel lay in bed talking about the future. About the possibility of fostering, about expanding Sterling Innovations, about whether they should finally replace Daniel's terrible couch. "Do you ever regret it?" Daniel asked. "Choosing this life instead of the one you had before?" Victoria thought about her old apartment, her old routines, the careful control she'd maintained over every aspect of her existence. She thought about the loneliness she'd told herself was strength, the walls she'd built and called protection. "No," she said. "I don't regret it. Sometimes I miss how simple it was, just worrying about myself and my company. But this is better. Harder, but better. Even with my terrible couch. Even with your terrible couch." She turned to face him in the darkness. "I spent 2 years after my accident convinced that my life was over, that the best I could hope for was to be successful and alone. And then you walked into that cafe and proved me wrong. You walked into that cafe. I was already sitting down. You know what I mean." She found his hand under the covers. "You taught me that I could be both things, successful and in love, strong and vulnerable, independent and part of a family. I didn't think those things could coexist. They barely coexist. We're constantly juggling. But we're juggling together. That's the difference." He pulled her closer, and they lay there in the comfortable silence of two people who didn't need to fill every moment with words. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Sam's nightlight glowed from down the hall. Somewhere in the house, the dishwasher hummed. It was ordinary and imperfect, and nothing like what Victoria had imagined her life would look like. It was also everything she'd never known she needed. The next morning, Victoria had a board meeting. She wheeled into the conference room at Sterling Innovations with her shoulders back and her head high, ready to present the quarterly earnings report. The board members greeted her warmly, even Gerald, who'd been so skeptical a year ago. After the meeting, Marcus pulled her aside. "I have news. Patricia Westbrook sold her shares." Victoria's eyebrows rose. "To whom?" "A consortium of small investors. She's completely out of the company. No more influence, no more phone calls to board members." "Why now?" Marcus shrugged. "Rumor is her son got tired of her meddling in everyone's lives. He apparently told her to either back off or lose him entirely. She chose to back off." Victoria thought about James, about his last attempt to win her back. Maybe he'd finally grown a spine, or maybe he'd just realized that his mother's bitterness was poisoning his own chances at happiness. Either way, it didn't matter. Patricia was gone, and Victoria's company was secure. "Good," she said simply. "Let's get back to work." That evening, she came home to find Daniel and Sam making dinner together. Or rather, Daniel was making dinner while Sam helped by stealing ingredients and making a mess. The kitchen was chaos, but it was their chaos. "How was the board meeting?" Daniel asked, kissing her hello. "Patricia's out, sold all her shares." "That's huge." It is. She wheeled to the fridge and grabbed a beer. It means I can finally stop looking over my shoulder. Does it feel good? She considered the question. A year ago, Patricia's surrender would have felt like a victory, like proof that Victoria had won. But now it just felt like closing a door that should have been closed a long time ago. It feels like resolution, she said. Like I can move forward without dragging the past with me. Sam tugged on her sleeve. Victoria, can you help me stir? Dad won't let me use the stove. Because you're 5 and it's hot. But I'm very mature for my age. Victoria laughed and helped Sam stir the sauce while Daniel monitored them both carefully. They ate dinner at the kitchen table, Sam chattering about his day at school, Daniel talking about a new project he'd landed. Victoria listened and contributed and felt the weight of the day lift from her shoulders. After dinner, while Daniel gave Sam a bath, Victoria sat in the living room looking at the photos on the mantel. There was one from their wedding day, Daniel holding her while Sam grinned between them. Another of the 3 of them at the lake, windblown and happy. A new one from last month, Sam's kindergarten graduation. Him in a tiny cap and gown, Victoria and Daniel on either side looking absurdly proud. Her phone buzzed with an email from Rachel. Subject: tomorrow's schedule 9 a.m. Call with Brennan. Team 11 a.m. Product development meeting. 2 p.m. Interview with TechCrunch. About adaptive technology innovations. 4 p.m. Leave the office. It's Friday and you have a family. Use them. Victoria smiled and typed back a single word. Deal. She'd learned, slowly and painfully, that success wasn't about working yourself into the ground. It was about building something sustainable, something that left room for the rest of life. She was still driven, still ambitious, still determined to make sterling innovations the best it could be. But she wasn't willing to sacrifice everything else for it anymore. Because at the end of the day, the company would survive without her. Sam and Daniel wouldn't. That night, lying in bed with Daniel's arm around her waist, Victoria thought about the journey that had brought her here, the accident that had changed everything, the long months of learning to live in a new body, the isolation she'd wrapped around herself like armor, and then Daniel walking into that cafe and seeing her, really seeing her, in a way no one else had. I love you, she said into the darkness. I love you too. He pressed a kiss to her shoulder. What brought that on? Just thinking about how different my life is now. How different I am. Better different or worse different? Just different. Not better or worse, just real. She turned to face him. I spent so long trying to be perfect. The perfect CEO. The perfect success story. The perfect example of overcoming adversity. And then I met you and Sam and realized perfection is exhausting. I'd rather be real. Real is definitely more interesting. Real is terrifying. That too. He smiled in the darkness. But we're doing it anyway. Yeah, Victoria said, settling back against his chest. We are. Outside, the wind continued to blow, carrying with it the promise of changing seasons. Inside, in the warmth of the home they'd built together, Victoria closed her eyes and let herself rest. Not because she'd stopped fighting, but because she'd finally found something worth fighting for. The next day was Saturday, and they had no plans except to exist together. Sam wanted to go to the park, so they went. Daniel's parents called to invite them to lunch, and for once Victoria said yes without resentment. Rachel texted to ask how she was doing, and Victoria responded with a photo of Sam covered in playground mulch, with the caption, "Living the Dream." Later, sitting on a bench while Sam played on the swings, Daniel asked the question he'd been building up to for weeks. So, about the fostering thing. Have you thought about it more? Victoria had thought about little else. She'd researched, read testimonials, talked to other foster parents. She'd looked at her life, her company, her marriage, her home, and asked herself honestly if there was room for more. The answer surprised her. I think we should do it, she said. Start with short-term fostering, see how it goes. I'm terrified and I'm going to be bad at it sometimes, but I think we should try. Daniel's face lit up. Really? Really. Sam's right. He'd be a good big brother, and we have space and resources and a lot of love to give. It seems wasteful not to share it. That's the most practical declaration of wanting to help kids I've ever heard. I'm a practical person. You're an amazing person. He kissed her, long and sweet, and Victoria felt something settle in her chest. Not certainty. She'd probably never have complete certainty about anything, but something close to it, something like peace. They started the fostering certification process the following week. It was invasive and exhausting and forced them to examine every aspect of their lives under a microscope. But they did it together, answering questions and filling out forms and taking the required classes. 6 months later, they brought home their first foster child, a 7-year-old girl named Maya who'd been removed from her home due to neglect. She was quiet and watchful, flinching at loud noises, hoarding food in her room despite being told she could eat whenever she wanted. Sam tried to befriend her immediately, showing her all his toys and explaining the complex rules of the games he'd invented. Maya watched him with wide eyes, not quite trusting, but not quite refusing either. That first night, Victoria sat in Maya's room while the girl got ready for bed. "If you need anything," Victoria said, "you can come get me or Daniel. We're right down the hall." Maya nodded but didn't say anything. She climbed into bed and pulled the covers up to her chin, and Victoria's heart broke a little. "Good night, Maya." "Good night." Victoria wheeled to the door, then paused. "I know this is scary. New house, new people, new rules, but we're glad you're here, and we're going to do our best to make this a safe place for you." Maya's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. "Okay." It wasn't much, but it was a start. Over the next few weeks, Maya slowly began to relax. She stopped hoarding food. She started talking more at dinner. She let Sam teach her how to play with Legos and even laughed once when Sam's elaborate spaceship collapsed. She watched Victoria navigate the house in her wheelchair with open curiosity, eventually asking questions about how it worked. "Do you wish you could walk?" Maya asked one afternoon while they colored together at the kitchen table. "Sometimes," Victoria said honestly, "but this is my life now, and I've learned to make it work." "Do people stare at you?" "Yes." "Does it make you mad?" "Sometimes, but mostly I just ignore them." Victoria set down her crayon and looked at Maya. "Why are you asking?" Maya was quiet for a moment. "My mom used to tell me I was too much, that I asked too many questions and needed too much attention and made her life harder." She looked up at Victoria with those two old eyes. "Am I too much here?" Victoria felt her chest constrict. "No, honey, you're not too much. You're exactly enough." "But I have problems. The social worker said I have trauma and I need therapy and I might be difficult." "We all have problems, Maya. I have chronic pain and trust issues. Daniel gets anxious about money. Sam has nightmares. We're all a little broken. That's what makes us a family." Maya considered this seriously. "Can I stay here for a long time?" Victoria wanted to promise forever, but she knew better than to make promises she couldn't keep. Maya's case was complicated. There was a possibility of reunification with her mother or placement with relatives. "I can't promise how long," Victoria said carefully. "But I can promise that while you're here, you're part of this family, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure you're safe and loved." It was enough. Maya nodded and went back to coloring, and Victoria sat there watching this brave little girl who'd been through too much and was still trying to trust. That night, after the kids were asleep, Victoria and Daniel lay in bed processing the weight of what they'd taken on. "I don't know if I'm equipped for this," Victoria admitted. "She needs so much, and I don't know if I can give her what she needs." "We'll figure it out together," Daniel said. "Same way we figured out everything else." "What if we mess her up more than she already is?" "What if we don't? What if we actually help her heal?" Victoria wanted to believe it. She wanted to believe that their broken little family could be exactly what Maya needed, but the fear was still there, constant and nagging. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Me too." Daniel pulled her closer. "But we're doing it anyway." The months passed. Maya stayed with them through fall and into winter. She started therapy and began to open up about her past. She bonded with Sam, the two of them becoming inseparable despite their age difference. She started calling Daniel and Victoria by their first names, then one day casually referred to them as "my parents" when talking to a teacher. Victoria's company continued to grow. She hired a second-in-command so she could have more flexibility with her schedule. She started leaving the office at reasonable hours, prioritizing dinner with her family over late-night conference calls. Sterling Innovations didn't collapse. It thrived, proving that sustainable success was possible. Daniel landed his biggest architectural project yet, designing a community center for a nonprofit that served disabled youth. He credited Victoria with inspiring the design, with teaching him to think about accessibility not as an afterthought, but as a fundamental requirement. And through it all, they kept choosing each other. On the good days and the terrible days and all the ordinary days in between. 2 years after their wedding, Victoria stood in the same cafe where it had all begun. She'd been invited to speak at a local business event, and she'd arrived early to grab coffee. The place looked exactly the same tables, same art on the walls, same barista who'd witnessed her breakdown. She ordered her caramel macchiato and sat by the window, watching people pass by on the street. Somewhere in the city, Daniel was meeting with clients. Sam and Maya were at school, probably driving their teachers crazy. Rachel was running Sterling Innovations with terrifying competence. Margaret was probably judging someone's life choices over brunch. Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Can we have pizza for dinner? Sam says we should have broccoli, but he's wrong." Victoria smiled and typed back. "Pizza sounds good, but you're also having broccoli." "Ugh, fine." Another text, this one from Daniel. "Meeting's running long. Can you pick up the kids?" "Already planned on it." "Have I mentioned that I love you?" "Not in the last 3 hours." "I was starting to wonder." "I love you, even when you're being difficult. Especially when I'm being difficult. Especially then." Victoria looked around the cafe, remembering the woman she'd been when she first walked in here. Broken and angry and convinced she'd never be whole again. She'd been so wrong. Healing hadn't meant going back to who she was before. It had meant becoming someone new. Someone who understood that strength wasn't about never needing help. That success wasn't measured only in profits and achievements. That love was a choice you made every day, even when it was hard. She wasn't perfect. She still had bad days when the pain was unbearable and the frustration overwhelming. She still struggled with trust and vulnerability. She still worked too much sometimes and pushed people away when she got scared. But she was also happy. Genuinely, messily, imperfectly happy. And that, Victoria had learned, was worth every risk she'd taken to get here.